The modern human condition is defined by an ongoing high-stakes civil war raging inside our own skulls. Every single day, we find ourselves locked in a grueling battle against our immediate impulses, struggling to resist the siren song of digital distractions, mindless consumerism, and toxic habits that systematically sabotage our long-term ambitions. In her brilliant, paradigm-shifting behavioral masterpiece, The Willpower Instinct, Stanford University health psychologist Kelly McGonigal completely overthrows the archaic, moralistic myth that self-control is a simple reflection of character, virtue, or brute force of will. McGonigal presents a radical biological and psychological thesis. Willpower is not a metaphysical concept, but a discrete physiological state, a finite bodily resource and evolutionary capacity that can be systematically measured, trained, and optimized. Through a meticulous breakdown of neurobiology, behavioral economics, and clinical case studies, the book serves as a precise operational blueprint to help us understand why we give in to temptation, how our brains trick us into self-sabotage, and how we can claim absolute sovereignty over our choices. To understand why our best intentions so frequently collapse in the face of temptation, we must isolate the primal evolutionary architecture of the human brain. Our capacity for self-control is primarily directed by the prefrontal cortex, the large piece of neural real estate sitting directly behind the forehead that acts as the executive control center of our minds. McGonigal reveals that the prefrontal cortex manages willpower through three distinct, highly integrated regions that handle three separate commands: I will, I won't, and I want. The I will power is the capacity to initiate and push through difficult, boring, or uncomfortable tasks that your long-term future self requires, like writing a complex script, working out, or paying your taxes. The I won't power is the defensive capacity to slam on the behavioral brakes, resisting immediate impulses, toxic cravings, and short-sighted distractions that threaten your security or health. The ultimate coordinator of these two forces is the I want power, the deep, unyielding neural storage of your core long-term goals, values, and authentic desires that acts as a cognitive North Star to keep you on track. The core tragedy of human biology is that this highly sophisticated, modern prefrontal network is permanently forced to coexist with the ancient impulsive limbic system, which evolved millions of years earlier to demand immediate gratification, hoard calories, and avoid immediate discomfort at all costs. When you are tired, stressed, or distracted, the primitive limbic system effectively hijacks your behavior, overriding your prefrontal executive controls and driving you to make choices that your future self will bitterly regret. This neurological vulnerability is profoundly exacerbated by a systemic physiological metric that McGonigal calls the willpower reserve, which is directly tied to a biological phenomenon known as heart rate variability, or HRV. When your body enters a state of high stress, your sympathetic nervous system takes the wheel, accelerating your heart rate and reducing the variable lag between heartbeats to prepare you for a primitive fight or flight response. In this hyper-reactive state, your brain shifts its finite energy reserves away from the sophisticated prefrontal cortex and routes them directly to the primal amygdala, rendering you structurally, biologically incapable of practicing long-term self-control. Conversely, when you enter a state of high willpower, what McGonigal terms the pause and plan response, your parasympathetic nervous system activates, calming your heart rate and drastically increasing your heart rate variability. This physiological shift channels blood flow and oxygen straight back into the prefrontal cortex, restoring your executive capacity for rational decision-making and impulse inhibition. McGonigal forces us to realize that willpower behaves exactly like a physical muscle. It is an expensive, energy-hungry biological resource that can be quickly depleted through chronic overuse, poor sleep, nutritional deficits, and ambient stress. If you exhaust your prefrontal capital by making a million minor, trivial decisions throughout a chaotic morning, your biological muscle will be completely spent by mid-afternoon, leaving you utterly defenseless against the major temptations that threaten to derail your destiny. To prevent this systematic depletion of our executive capital, we must master an array of bizarre, highly counterintuitive psychological traps that our brains use to trick us into self-sabotage. Beginning with the phenomenon of moral licensing. Moral licensing is a profound cognitive glitch where doing something good or disciplined makes us feel entitled to immediately indulge in something bad or self-destructive. When an investor exercises for an hour in the morning, their brain treats that healthy choice as a license to eat a high-calorie, sugary meal for lunch, rationalizing that they have earned the right to cheat. In the corporate world, an executive who works diligently on a complex project for 2 hours will often feel a sense of moral virtue that licenses them to spend the rest of the afternoon mindlessly scrolling through social media feeds or checking trivial emails. The trap of moral licensing occurs because we mistakenly frame our long-term goals as a series of heavy, punitive obligations and our toxic temptations as rewards. Each time you make progress toward a goal, your brain interprets that progress as a cue that you can safely relax your discipline, causing you to take 1 step forward and 2 steps back. To shatter this illusion, you must radically shift your internal grammar. Progress should never be treated as a license to cheat, but as a powerful momentum that demands further execution. You must stop looking at your healthy, disciplined choices as acts of moral virtue and start viewing them as simple, logical expressions of who you actually want to be. This cognitive distortion achieves its most dangerous, explosive acceleration through a psychological pattern behavioral scientists call the "what the hell" effect. This loop is the ultimate catalyst for total behavioral collapse, commonly triggered when an individual slightly violates a self-imposed boundary or diet. Imagine a person who promises to spend their evening writing their manuscript, but out of a brief moment of boredom, they open their phone and spend 15 minutes watching a mindless video. Instead of calmly acknowledging the minor slip and returning to their work, their brain explodes into a wave of intense guilt, shame, and self-criticism, interpreting the minor distraction as a definitive verdict of total failure. To escape the agonizing emotional pain of this immediate self-hatred, the individual turns to the very comfort that triggered the problem in the first place, screaming, "What the hell? I've already ruined the night anyway. I might as well spend the next 4 hours binging on entertainment." McGonigal highlights a staggering, deeply empathetic clinical reality. The ultimate cure for the "what the hell" effect is not harsher self-criticism or stricter rules, but radical self-forgiveness. Data consistently shows that individuals who respond to their behavioral failures with compassion, acceptance, and understanding return to their goals vastly faster and stick with them longer than those who wallow in guilt. Shame is an incredibly dirty, highly inefficient source of fuel that down-regulates the prefrontal cortex and drives you straight into the arms of temptation. Forgiveness, however, removes the emotional emergency, allowing your executive brain to smoothly reset and resume its long-term stride. This structural reset must be reinforced by a highly sophisticated mastery of our brain's internal reward systems, specifically the dopamine-driven promise of happiness. Deep within our neural architecture lies a network known as the mesolimbic dopamine pathway, which fires every single time we anticipate an opportunity for pleasure, reward, or survival. When you see a notification light flash on your phone, catch the smell of fast food, or see a clearance sale banner online, your brain secretes a massive surge of dopamine. The critical, life-altering insight McGonigal delivers is that dopamine is not the molecule of actual pleasure, satisfaction, or happiness. It is purely the molecule of anticipation, desire, and craving. Dopamine does not make us feel good. It makes us feel intensely alert, restless, and psychologically unfulfilled, screaming that we must grasp the object of temptation to secure our well-being. Modern society is systematically engineered by tech companies and consumer conglomerates to weaponize this dopamine loop, creating an environment of continuous neurobiological overstimulation that keeps regular people in a state of perpetual, frantic desire. To survive this onslaught, you must decouple the promise of happiness from actual satisfaction. Learning to look at your intense cravings not as an objective signal that an indulgence will bring you joy, but as an involuntary, chemical trick designed to exploit your evolutionary hardware. By recognizing that the anticipation of a reward is vastly different from the actual experience of it, you strip temptation of its urgent authority, allowing your prefrontal cortex to confidently step in and maintain its boundary. To operationalize these neurobiological insights and integrate them permanently into our chaotic daily lives, we must rely on the strategic tool of pre-commitment. Willpower should never be used as a desperate, last-minute defense mechanism when you are already standing face-to-face with an intoxicating temptation. By then, your prefrontal cortex is already losing the chemical war against the limbic system. True mastery requires you to automate your discipline long before the moment of crisis arrives, executing what behavioral economists call Ulysses contracts. Just as the mythical hero Ulysses tied himself to the mast of his ship to resist the irresistible song of the sirens, you must modify your future environment to make self-sabotage physically impossible or prohibitively expensive. If you want to protect your focus while writing a book or editing a script, use software to completely lock yourself out of the internet for a fixed block of time. Or give a financial forfeit to a collaborator that triggers automatically if you miss a deadline. Furthermore, you can harness the phenomenon of the 10-minute rule. Whenever you feel an overwhelming urge to indulge a harmful distraction, tell your brain that you are completely allowed to have it, but you must wait exactly 10 minutes first. During that 10-minute window of enforced delay, the immediate, frantic dopamine surge will naturally peak and begin to decline. Allowing your rational prefrontal cortex to regain its footing, evaluate the choice in the light of your long-term values, and choose the freedom you actually deserve. Ultimately, the willpower instinct is an urgent, liberating biological manifesto that transforms our relationship with our internal struggles from a place of moral shame to a place of precise engineering. It completely strips away the toxic, self-defeating cultural illusion that we are helpless, weak-willed victims of our desires, reminding us that our self-control is a highly dynamic system that can be systematically managed, protected, and expanded across our entire lifespan. The journey to an extraordinary life of creative legacy, professional consistency, and internal peace does not require an external miracle or a flawless, superhuman character. It simply requires you to look at your biology with absolute respect, to build automated habits of physiological recovery, and to outsmart your own primitive impulses through deliberate, strategic design. By choosing self-forgiveness over toxic guilt, pause and plan responses over fight or flight reactivity, and automated pre-commitments over last-minute willpower battles, you break the chains of behavioral stagnation forever. The next time you find yourself standing at a chaotic crossroads, tempted to abandon your deep purpose for a fleeting moment of comfort, pause, take a single deep breath, activate your prefrontal sovereignty, and claim the future you are entirely capable of building.